911, where's your emergency?
I need a missing persons report.
Okay. Who's missing?
Tammy, Rhea. Foul play could be suspected here.
Okay, and why do you think that, sir?
Me and her have been having an affair. Apparently her husband has found out about it.
Okay, what is his name?
Brad, Rhea.
On February the 8th, 2006, the mere disappearance of 41-year-old Tammy Rhea took the shape of a murder mystery when detectives soon realized that they were dealing with mysterious relationships where anyone could be covering a lethal secret.
This was something certainly unexpected.
It was a cold, calculated, planned killing with a plan in place to frame for the murder.
The pieces of evidence that showed up only added more riddles for the detectives to solve and left them with multiple suspects.
Our office received a letter in the mail. The letter had intimate details of the crime.
We were looking at a letter straight from a murderer. Never have I ever seen a case so crazy.
It had just been a few months since Brad and Tammy Rhea and their 11-year-old daughter Haley had moved to Pierre City, South Dakota for Brad's new job as a manager. But a haunting nightmare shadowed the family before they could settle at ease. In the early morning of February the 8th, 2007, daughter Haley searched for her mother in the house as she woke up, but Tammy was nowhere to be found, even though her cell phone and purse were present in the home. Haley went to school under the impression that her mother would return soon, but a cruel reality was soon to wreak havoc on everybody close to Tammy. Around 10:30 a.m. on the same morning, the Pierre Police Department received this call from a Kmart store.
Your name, please?
I'm Brian Clark.
Who's missing?
Tammy, Rhea.
Spell the last name?
Reay. Foul play could be suspected here.
Okay, and why do you think that, sir?
Hopefully this is discreet, but me and her have been having an affair. Apparently her husband has found out about it.
Okay, what is his name?
Brad, Reay, Rhea.
Would you like to come out to the police station and file that report?
Tammy was reported missing by Brian Clark, the assistant manager at the Kmart store where she worked. Brian wasn't just a concerned coworker. In fact, he and Tammy were secretly involved in a romantic relationship. When Brad and Tammy shifted to Pierre City from Billings, Montana in August 2004, Brad gave blood and sweat to his aspiring job as the manager in a Walmart store. But as his workaholic lifestyle kept getting serious, it came with a heavy price. Facing the challenges of leaving their once peaceful lives and moving to a sparsely populated city, Haley was left without a father and Tammy was left without a husband. While fighting the bouts of loneliness, Tammy soon got herself a job in the shoe department of the local Kmart store where she met Brian. Tammy slowly started finding a companion in Brian, who was married himself but got involved with Tammy. Soon their friendship turned into a deep love interest as one thing led to another. Brian confessed to detectives that he and Tammy had been intimately involved for months, a revelation that added a new layer of complexity to her disappearance. Now, this wasn't just a case of a missing person. It was the beginning of a tangled web of secrets, betrayal, and hidden desires that would soon be brought to light. The fact that Brian called 911 a mere half an hour after Tammy's reporting time in the store drew strong suspicion of him early on. As per the concerns of Brian, Tammy had confessed her extramarital affair to her husband Brad. Officers acted upon the information and met Brad in the Walmart store.
They found Brad working that morning to question him about where Tammy might be. Law enforcement described Brad as pretty shocked and surprised to see them there.
Brad was cooperative, claimed he had no idea where she was, that she had left the night before. The officer said, well, let's go down to your house and do a welfare check.
He gives consent to go with them to the house and look through the house. We walk inside the garage and we see a black Durango, which is Tammy's vehicle, inside the garage.
And then he saw something disturbing.
A grisly sight struck them in the garage of the house, where they saw a black Durango parked with blood dripping on the floor from the back door of the vehicle. Upon opening the door, the detectives were hit with a powerful odor of a bleach-like cleaning solution. The back seats were covered with large stains of blood. Despite the visible efforts of cleaning the blood, the stains were clearly visible in the back seat. The case had taken a grim turn for the detectives with this gruesome discovery.
The dynamics are strange because Brad gave consent to look through the house, but the individual that gives you that consent can withdraw it at any time. So we stop our searching and back out and then apply for a search warrant.
Now we're searching for Tammy or her body, but they obviously decided they needed a full interview with Brad, and so they asked him if he would come down to the police department for an interview.
While unaware of what officers had found in the garage, Brad was brought in for a formal interrogation on the same day of February the 8th, 2024.
Have you hit anything with the vehicle lately?
No.
Have you ran over an animal with it?
No. Did you guys find something?
Yeah. We found blood running off the running board, dripping onto the concrete. And we're checking to see how that got there.
Brad was surprised to know about the findings of blood in his garage, but he didn't seem to know how it got there.
Let's assume that it is your wife's blood. How would that have got there? And how do you explain the very strong odor of the cleaning product?
Brad told the officers that he'd gone home the previous night at around 10:30 a.m. to find that Tammy wasn't home. Then, in the dead of the night, he saw Tammy come home around 1 a.m. with a companion. Tammy parked her Durango at home and went with her companion in the vehicle. Seeing that, Brad said he followed them in Tammy's car, but midway through the drive, the car had a malfunction and he had to park it by the roadside. At that point, Brad said a highway patrolman approached him and they had a conversation. After that, he returned home as Tammy had already gone ahead a considerable distance and he was unable to follow her.
So why didn't you take the Durango next trip?
The Durango's a lot faster. I mean, it's more maneuverable.
So you're planning on going on a high-speed pursuit here?
I'm
It's hard for me to believe that somehow blood miraculously got inside the vehicle that you were last driving.
So where did we have the argument?
Well, that's one of my unanswered questions, isn't it? I'm guessing inside your house.
So there'd be blood everywhere.
There might be.
In an interesting turn of events, as Brad told the detectives, Tammy had decided to end her marriage with Brad after she started dating someone from work. Tammy had confronted Brad with her extramarital affair and had asked for divorce after Haley's current school year ended. The officers asked Brad about the person Tammy was having an affair with, but he claimed he didn't know anything about her lover.
What I'm being told is your wife had a boyfriend, you found out about it.
She told me about it.
She told you about it. Tell me about that. What'd she have to say?
That never crossed your mind? That's the first thing I'd be
It
asking.
crossed my mind, but
Why didn't you ask her?
I didn't want to know.
You didn't want to know?
Yeah, I gotta believe that you're leaving out a lot of this conversation. Doesn't matter how laid back of a guy you are.
We've never fought ever,
You never fought ever.
and we've always treated each other with respect.
Brad, you know that she's dead.
No.
Where can I go find Tammy right now and do the right thing?
You know, all this evidence points at me, but I'm hoping that the body is found because there'll be something to set me free.
Brad's claims remained shady throughout the interrogation. Although Brad didn't strike as a guy who could murder his wife, detectives still thought he had a rather strong motive to do so after Tammy had ditched him the way she did.
Brad, we're going to arrest you right now for first-degree murder.
Despite not getting the truth, officers arrested Brad after the interrogation as they were concerned that if released, he might destroy evidence if he was actually involved in the crime. But it was still a long road ahead for the detectives to uncover this mystery. It was almost certain by that time that Tammy was most probably dead, but the absence of her body kept entangling the investigation. In the meantime, while waiting for the search warrant, officers contacted Tammy's family and friends, but no one had heard from her. While Brad stayed in custody and Tammy was still missing, detectives met their daughter Haley in her school, who had no idea yet about the disappearance of her mother.
Okay, tell me when you figured out your mom and dad were maybe having problems or...
Yeah, they told me they were getting a divorce.
Okay. Did they tell you why at all?
Because my mom doesn't love my dad anymore, and my dad's never home from work.
Did your mom and dad argue very much?
No.
No? Did they ever get physical with each other at all or hit each other at all?
No.
Any idea where your mom might have went at all?
No.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the search warrant for Brad's house had finally come through. When detectives thoroughly searched the house, they were left with two completely different scenarios, which terminated the possibility of connecting the dots just yet.
Tammy's Durango is a great point of interest. That gets processed.
They seized that Durango immediately to take a sample of that blood and see if it matches Tammy, to look for fingerprints in the blood, to look for a murder weapon that might be in there.
Then we go inside the home. We figure if there's that much blood in the Durango, that there's got to be some type of evidence of murder inside the home.
The detectives walked through the house. They couldn't believe it. There was no obvious signs in the home of a struggle, no blood trail.
We're not finding any evidence.
I wanted luminol tested on that bedroom. No blood. I had that mattress microscopically examined. It didn't have any blood on it. And so they were convinced it didn't happen in the house.
Brad said he was stopped by the trooper about 1:30 or so in the morning.
We come to find out that Brad had, in fact, been telling the truth and that he did come in contact with a highway patrol trooper and the interaction was caught on dash cam.
What's your name? Bradria, R-E-A-Y?
Do you have any ID with you at all?
No, I must have ran to the store real quick.
The first obvious question is, do we really have the right guy?
They quickly turned to have a formal talk with the second possible suspect, Brian Clark, who reported Tammy's disappearance. Brian was a married man himself, and the fact that Tammy was ready to divorce her husband for Brian made him a suspect, as he would also have plausible motives to silence Tammy in order to save his marriage. Brian was brought in for the interrogation, where he told the detectives about his whereabouts.
At the police station, Brian did show up with his attorney. This was something certainly unexpected.
They questioned him very closely about his whereabouts the night she went missing. He indicated that he had been with Tammy February 7, 2006. They had gone to a motel. He dropped Tammy off at 5 o'clock and went home to his wife.
The story Brian gave investigators obviously differed from Brad's version of the previous evening, where Tammy had come home, been with somebody, presumably Brian, and then had left with him. And that was the last that he had seen her.
Brian's account was completely different from what Brad had told the officers. To confirm Brian's side of the story, officers called Brian's wife to check his alibi. His wife didn't have any knowledge about Brian's extramarital affair. She was informed of the truth about Brian's infidelity, but she confirmed that Brian was, in fact, at home on February 7th. But while she confirmed Brian's whereabouts, she added that she slept on the recliner the night before and not in the bedroom, which she often does when she has a sore neck. This would have allowed Brian to leave his house again, but there was no way to cross-check further into his story. Brian remained an equal suspect along with Brad, further complicating the investigation. If Brian was actually involved in the crime, it would mean that he went back to Brad's house to park the blood-soaked Durango after murdering Tammy. If this was true, then Brian had skillfully tried to frame Brad by leaving blood in the car. What once was a straightforward missing persons case had now slowly started to head towards an endless riddle, and only help from the outside could have revived the investigation now. It had almost been 2 days since Tammy was missing. While detectives stayed clueless about the crime or the criminal, DNA reports came back for the blood found in the Durango. It was Tammy's blood, which pretty much confirmed that wherever she was most likely dead.
We need to find Tammy and figure out where she is. It's tough to work a murder investigation without a body. We've got firemen, we've got law enforcement training cadets out combing the hillsides, the river breaks.
About sunset on the 9th, a helicopter was flying over the area north of town up by the hydroelectric dam. And one of the guys in the helicopter spotted what he thought was a body.
Lo and behold, it was Tammy.
A lifeless body was spotted lying naked in the giant fields around the famous Oahe hydraulic dam. Detectives immediately identified the body as Tammy's. She was stabbed dozens of times all over the body and was portrayed with the intent of humiliation. The body was sent for autopsy. The discovery of Tammy's body gave a big leap for the officers in what was essentially a blind investigation up to that point. Meanwhile, little Haley, who was hoping to be with her parents soon, was handed the news of her mother's demise.
You're gonna have to help me with this, because this is gonna be tough for me too. I got little kids at home too, so we believe that your mom's dead. There's no easy way that I could tell you that, sweetheart. Okay? Right now, your dad has been arrested for her murder.
It didn't feel real. It felt like I was actually in a TV show.
I promised Haley that if there was anything at all that I could do to help her through this thing, that all she needed to do was call me.
The autopsy report revealed that Tammy was stabbed 37 times with a knife, and some of the wounds in her chest showed the knife had been forced right up to the hilt. A multitude of the stabs were inflicted after she was already dead. However, no signs of physical assault before the murder were found. Officers relied heavily on the body to find positive clues about the killer, but the body gave away nothing about the perpetrator and brought the detectives back to ground zero. As each day passed, the clock ticked faster for the cops as they were unsure how long they could keep Brad in custody without any solid proof. The only thing detectives were looking to find foremost was the place where Tammy was murdered, believing it could be the one place with evidence present. More than a month had passed with continuous efforts, and before detectives could get their hands on anything, a bombshell dropped on them, wrapping major details of the murder around itself.
Our office received a letter in the mail purported to be written by a cousin of Brian Clark. Brad was in jail. All of Brad's mail and communications were monitored. Do we really have the right guy? We need to go back and reconsider whether Brian Clark is actually the killer.
It was written by a cousin of Brian Clark, the boyfriend, portraying a disturbing scene of the night Tammy went missing. He wrote that on the night of February the 8th, Brian came to meet him in a black Durango, and he was drenched in blood. Brian and Tammy had met in a motel in the evening before they parted ways. In the dead of night, Brian had gone again to pick up Tammy from her house. They went somewhere and indulged in intercourse. Tammy had asked Brian to wear protection, in response to which Brian passed an offensive comment about her relationship with her husband. Soon, the conversation turned into a heated argument. Tammy had cussed out Brian in anger, which made him lash out at her. Brian physically assaulted Tammy after that and eventually turned violent on her. He started stabbing Tammy continuously. When she tried to run, Brian stabbed her 5 times in the back. As Brian made sure Tammy took her last breath, he wrapped her body in the sheet and dumped it where it was found. The letter narrated events that could only be known by the killer or someone who knew the killer closely. But there was one particular detail mentioned in the letter that blew the minds of detectives and made them rethink everything. The letter revealed that Tammy was assaulted before she was murdered, and Brian had lost a condom in her rectum. Neither any signs of assault nor a condom was found in her body during the autopsy. As the letter claimed the presence of this evidence, it could not be left unnoticed, which prompted the detectives to implement a rare act with the hope of filling the mundane bag of evidence. A second autopsy was performed on Tammy's body, and the results dumbfounded everybody. It confirmed that a condom was actually present inside the body. This shocking turnover pointed a direct lethal blame on Brian Clark. Forensics examined the condom for DNA testing, but due to an extended period of its presence in bodily acids, any DNA that could have been there was completely destroyed, which failed the examiners to officially match it with Brian's DNA. But the claims of the letter did not go wasted. The mysterious arrival of the letter kept the investigators up for nights, and eventually it shed a unique light for them to see a secret pathway towards the killer, which turned the case on its head. Investigators, while going through the letter over and over, got hit with a wild intuition. They recalled a particularly strange statement made by their first suspect, Brad Rhea. The officer revisited the interrogation with Brad.
I'm hoping that the body is found because there'll be something to set me free, like DNA and stuff like that.
This particular statement by Brad opened a room full of doubts. Findings of the condom in the autopsy had directly tried to point a finger at Brian, but the letter secretly gave away an unexpected detail that nobody had expected. Brad claimed that he didn't know whom Tammy was dating.
That never crossed your mind? That's the first thing I'd be asking.
It crossed my mind, but
why didn't you ask her?
I didn't want to know.
You didn't want to know?
Yeah, I gotta believe that you're leaving out a lot of this conversation. Doesn't matter how laid back of a guy you are.
We've never fought ever.
You never fought ever?
And we've always treated each other with respect.
Detectives went for another look through in Brad's house to find something that could connect Brad with Brian. This time, something was indeed waiting in the house to be found. Detectives discovered a small audio recording device in Brad's closet. This wasn't just a clue. It was the smoking gun that proved they were up against a calculated mastermind.
It's just me. I just need to hear your voice because Brad left me a long note in my car. He's just making it really hard because he just doesn't understand. Well, I just have to hear your voice because I love you very, very much.
This was Tammy, recorded while she had a conversation with Brian after Brad left her a bouquet and a love note in her car. As the recorder was rewound to the start, a different voice entertained the detectives, starting to connect the dots.
You might know what's going on, but I don't know. We'll have to be careful. Brad might know what to do, so we need to be more careful. So you can't call me at home or do that, all right?
In a strange surprise, this was Brad's voice, trying to record himself. It turned out that at some point, the recorder was secretly planted around Tammy by Brad.
Brad wanted to know who the boyfriend was, and so he came up with a scheme. And the scheme was to go to Tammy's car while she's in at work at Kmart, put flowers and a love letter in there, and a digital recorder, voice activated. He hoped to catch Tammy calling the boyfriend so that he could find out who is the boyfriend. Tammy walked right into that trap.
Because Brad left me a long note in my car. Well, I just have to hear your voice. I love you very, very much.
The recorder was pretty huge because we catch Brad in a lie at that point.
Brad knew who the boyfriend was, even though he had told the detectives he didn't know.
Detectives were convinced that a twisted plot was in motion, even with Brad locked up in prison. But the receiving of the letter was one big riddle keeping the detectives up at night. If Brad was in prison all this time, then the question arose, who could have sent it? Detectives were eventually prompted to look deeper into Brad's activities in prison itself. Detectives tapped his phone calls and looked into his meeting records in prison. Nothing concerning surfaced in the records, but one of Brad's regular visitors caught their attention. It turned out that Brad had a twin brother named Brett. Detectives noticed that Brad was having regular interactions with his twin brother for the past month. It didn't seem like just a sibling reunion. It was a pattern that hinted at something far more sinister. A day before the letter arrived, Brett had gone to meet Brad in prison.
Brett did come to see Brad at the jail. The jail at the time didn't have video recording in the meeting rooms.
They put a search warrant on Brett, and when they searched Brett's car, they got the shock of a lifetime. We found the template frame letter.
Brett was able to tell us that Brad asked him to write down everything and directed that it be sent out.
Brett eventually confessed that his brother had narrated the letter to him in prison, word by word, and had asked to send out 4 copies to the investigators. The letter was a well-thought-out master plan played by Brad, which fell short of its original target just by inches. The master plan was completely decoded to its core after interrogating Brett. In numerous communicative letters that Brad had sent to Brett while in prison, it turned out he'd also sent a hand-drawn map of a fishing site, which was itself a shady act for the person who was fighting for his life in prison. That map eventually led the detectives to an actual fishing site in Pierre City. There, the riddle of Tammy's murder breathed its last after the most heartbreaking discovery shook the search team and detectives.
A search and rescue officer out of Watertown discovered 3 bags full of bloody bedding. I'll never forget that day. We went out to open those 3 bags, and out came pillows, shams, blankets, and a tarp.
That blood was sent to the DNA lab.
And when the results came back, our worst fears were confirmed that it was Tammy's blood.
Now we absolutely could prove where the crime took place. It took place in Brad's house.
Brad Rhea had almost planned a perfect murder of his wife. At the beginning of February 2007, Tammy shared her feelings about getting a divorce and being involved with another man. Just a week later, Tammy was killed. Brad had hidden inside himself deep-rooted feelings of revenge and hatred that were strong enough to take a deathly shape. As the name of Brian Clark came out in the open, Brad stalked the couple's intimate meetings, which usually happened in Brian's truck. But what he did next was beyond anything anyone could have imagined. During one such encounter, Brad succeeded in collecting Brian's used condom after he threw one out of the truck. After Brad got a hold of Brian's condom, he moved on to execute his final step, which was to kill Tammy. On the night of February 7, 2006, before Tammy went to sleep, Brad had created a deathbed.
Brad had put a tarp underneath the bedding in Tammy's bedroom prior to the time she went to bed that night.
Brad put several blankets over the tarp and then put the fitted sheet and then the rest of the bedding so that Tammy would not know she was sleeping on a tarp. He went in and stabbed her to death through the blankets, and as he would pull the knife back out, the blanket would clean the blade, and consequently you did not have the usual blood spatter pattern that you might see in any other situation.
He was able to roll up Tammy, the bedding, and everything in a tarp and take it out to the Durango, and that's how he managed to get her out of the house.
Brad removed her clothes to make it look like an assault, and then did what was intended to be the most crucial part of his plan. He put Brian's condom in her rectum for the detectives to find out later. By doing so, the man intended to frame Brian Clark and walk away freely himself. Sadly for Brad, he hid the condom a little too well to be found out in the first autopsy. When Brad got to know that the police had not found the condom, he arranged one more setup with his brother to have him send out letters to the detectives. Brad was officially charged with first-degree murder of his wife, and the case was finally ready to be heard before a judge, where a final bombshell awaited to twist the case even more. In January 2007, the trials commenced for the murder of Tammy Rhea. Brad, when held before the judge, accepted that Tammy's murder took place in his home, but it was actually committed by Haley.
Brad told the jury he heard some noise in the middle of the night. He went downstairs to Tammy's bedroom, and there was Haley standing over her mother with knife in hand. He claimed that Haley was in some sort of a catatonic state and that she had killed her mother and didn't even know it. Brad claimed to protect Haley, he wrapped up Tammy's body and went to hide it.
He added that Haley didn't awaken from her catatonic state until after he'd cleaned all the blood off her and comforted her.
He said I used to stab my teddy bears and always had problems. And I was mad that my mom wanted a divorce. Not only did I lose my mom, I lost my dad, and now he's gonna blame me so that he can get free. It was hard.
Brad had once again turned the case upside down with this claim. But soon enough, this claim too turned out to be a filthy tactic to save himself. Brad had tried to blame his 12-year-old daughter for the murder of her mother and said that he was willing to go to prison for Haley. This prolonged the trials to a certain extent, but the claims were soon straightened out to be another one of Brad's lies. Haley's grandparents, prosecutors, as well as the judge condemned Brad's cheap and disturbing approach to framing his daughter after he tried to frame Brian. Brad was finally convicted with first-degree murder on January 23, 2007. At the mere age of 11, Haley had to witness what no child should. But the kind of trauma she endured did not bring her down. Haley grew up to be a strong young woman and chose the path of spreading awareness about domestic abuse.
I run a Facebook page in memory of my mom and has statistics and stuff about domestic violence. And then I travel to schools and speak about domestic violence.
Haley later shared her heart in an interview about how it was to live with her father.
He was very controlling, emotionally abusive. Like, whatever my mom did, he had to be right there, every time, everywhere. So.
Just had to always be with her?
Yes,
and
right next to her.
And did he try to control what she did?
Well, he was always working, but when he did come home, he had to be right there. And if we did go somewhere, he would just show up.
After being proven guilty, Brad still took his case to the Supreme Court. He raised his defense by condemning the authorities for not preserving the DNA evidence in the case properly, which he thought would have saved his life. Brad Rhea went to every height to prove his innocence. On February 18, 2024, Brad Rhea died in prison, with the cause of his death remaining unknown. What do you think was the biggest mistake that led to his conviction? Do share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have any cases you'd like us to cover, feel free to leave your suggestions. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mysterious 7 for more captivating true stories like this one. And if you enjoy our content, consider becoming a member and unlock early access to the exclusive content.